learn from our ancestors. It's definitely from it's definitely from um, both male and female ancestors. So last week we read from chapter 25 this this weird this weird text that Abraham got remarried and had more kids before he died. And then his two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, helped bury him. Then we read about Ishmael's uh, descendants, a little tangent on there. And then we began a new Torah portion and a new kind of story, which is the story of Isaac. But Isaac, we read about the fact that his wife, Rebecca, can't have children, just like his mom. And then she finally gets pregnant and she starts to suffer with the twins. And God speaks to her and tells her there's two nations. And we read right up to the point where Jacob and Esau are born. And the part that we finished with in verse 28 was that Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebecca favored Jacob. And we're going to start a whole series of family dysfunction that is on a different level. We've read about, as I said, family dysfunction goes all the way back to the beginning, to Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Uh, but in the Cain and Abel story, we don't know like anything that happens. It literally says there's actually probably a line that's missing, by the way, too. But it literally just says Cain and Abel went out to the field, and Cain killed Abel, and we don't know anything about their conversation. We don't know anything about the full dynamics of what's going on here. By the time we get to midway through Genesis, and we're literally now midway through Genesis. Genesis is 50 chapters. Chapter 25, we get discussions. We get a little bit more detail, and the stories are maybe they're not everything we want because there are a lot of midrash we're going to be reading, or we're going to delve into some of the midrash, but um, there's at least a little bit of understanding of motivation, at the very least. This is really connected to Wednesday night class, which is moving into Hollywood and television and film the next couple of weeks. But then after that, it's going to get into comic books and graphic novels. This is a very interesting Bible, really kind of the literal translation. But this is the book of Genesis, as it says, all 50 chapters. This is done by one of the greatest graphic novelists of all time. Um, and he definitely used Jewish sources for it. He actually gives he's actually married to a Jewish woman for a very long time. This is R. Crumb, who, if you've seen anything with graphic novels and kind of followed this genre, even tangentially, or just, somebody's shown you a high level graphic novel, this guy is the guy. So this is a really interesting Bible because it's illustrated. It's an illustrated Bible, and it's illustrated, and it says right here, adult supervision recommended for minors. Yeah, and he's not joking. I mean, he is, but there's a level of truth to that you don't have normally. But he took it very seriously, and he used the Robert Alter translation, which is a great translation. Robert Alter, for a long time, was professor of Bible. He also happens to be Jewish and has a very Jewish take on the Bible. Um, he used the Alter translation, and he says right here, I would like to publicly acknowledge my gratitude to Robert Alter for allowing me to liberally use and hopefully not abuse his translation. Uh, and then he used several Jewish friends, their insights to help him with this illustrated Bible. So this just came out a couple years ago, probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And to me, it's one of the more innovative Bible translations, interpretation. I mean, it's not so much interpretation as it is The art is the interpretation. This came out in 2009, actually. So 16, 17 years ago, longer than I thought. So you want an interesting companion as we go through um, Genesis, especially these very dysfunctional stories, which, I mean, the allusions to some of the sexual situations, which that's why he says this is not for minors. We're going to get a little bit more. Even the stories that sound like the previous stories get a little bit more graphic. If that's not, yeah, if that's not going to entice you to pay attention, I don't know what does. But we finished with this last uh, line about Isaac favoring one child, Rebecca favoring the other, and or loving the other, and the fact that, you know, I mentioned Esau's at the face of it seems to be conditional, whereas Rebecca seems to just be compensating, maybe, or loves Jacob unconditionally. But, you know, remember, Jacob's born second, and Rebecca was the one who was told, "One people shall be mightier than the other. The older shall serve the younger." So she knew what was happening, and maybe that's also part of what was going on. All right. So today we're going to read a couple of vignettes. This one is the most famous one of the two that we're going to read today. It's actually part of two stories that people oftentimes conflate, which is Jacob and Esau birthright, Jacob and Esau blessing, but they're two different stories. They're separated by a chapter. Next week we'll read the blessing one, but this is people oftentimes forget. They conflate it. They bring the two stories together, and they forget that they're two different stories. Um, um, but we're going to read them with a little bit of space between them, so that's maybe a good thing because we'll remember both. Hopefully, everyone will be here next week too. But if you're not, you listen to it and maybe you'll have a chance to whatever. I mean, hopefully, no matter what, you'll you'll relate the two stories back and forth. So let's read from chapter 29, verse 29. Sorry, chapter 25, verse 29. Rosemary, would you like to take us through the
Okay.
story of the stew?
Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the open, famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down, for I am famished," which is why he was named Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "I am at the point of death. So what of use is my birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob then gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank, and he rose and went away. Thus did Esau spurn the birthright.
Yep. So this story has several things going on here. Um, um, you know, Part of it is an explanation, little explanation for why his name is Edom. His name is not just Esau, but also Edom, which means red. The red lentil soup that he had. Um, the word Edom is used, Adom, right? Like Adam, Adamah, earth. One, two, and then he's called Edom. So the red stuff is uh, kind of accentuated, which again, It probably had to do with the earth in that area being red because of the high copper content, kind of like the red hills that we have in Arizona, Southwest. But yeah, that's why his descendants, the Edomites, are called Edom, not because of the earth, but because of this red lentil soup. Um, so these verses are very famous because they're part of what establishes Esau as not being worthy, not being a worthy son. So his inability to value his inheritance. Remember, when they're talking about the birthright, he's saying, I'm giving up 50% of my inheritance, right? Because there are two sons. Isaac and Rebekah have two sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau, being the oldest, would have inherited two-thirds, and Jacob would have inherited a third. Instead, now Jacob gets two-thirds and Esau gets a third. So he winds up giving up half of his inheritance. So this is a this is definitely there's something wrong here, right? There's something wrong in this story that we have to recognize. Well, let's talk about it because there's definitely dysfunction here,
Hmm.
right? There's two brothers. The parents aren't even necessarily, well, they're not involved in the scene other than we've already established that they have their favorites. But something really, like why is this story in the Bible, right? Where is this in establishing these characters? The rabbis are torn about Jacob in a sense. He's our ancestor, so they're they're hesitant to make him completely a jerk. But there is rabbinic discussion over whether what Jacob does here is, some weird form of, it's not really extortion, but like,
It's predatory.
yeah, it's predatory. Yeah, which by the
It's
way, the story
siblings.
says
Predatory
It's
capitalists.
siblings messing with each other. That's all it is. It's just
it,
siblings being siblings.
yeah, but
Yeah.
this actually has
And then
consequences.
Esau clearly flunks the marshmallow test.
Yes, but Esau exactly. He flunked the marshmallow test, and Esau proves, according to our sages, to some extent, why he doesn't deserve to be the primary inheritor, right? So he shows it right here. He shows he has no value for it. There's no way he could be that hungry that he gives up. Like, how hungry would someone have to be, right? So there is rabbinic tradition that that's not what a brother does to another brother, right? You don't do that. Uh, and there's difference of opinion here on how bad what Jacob does is. There's another interesting issue here, which is that you know they the sages help they amplify Esau's lack of character in an interesting way. Does anyone know what it is? It's on this verse right here. There's an interesting midrash. It's not a midrash, it's a whole midrashic. There's a whole midrashic field of the field actually coming in from the open. It says Esau came in min hasadeh, right? Esau comes from the field. Does anybody know what that's euphemistically saying? It's that
Brothel.
he's been out carousing.
Mm.
He's been out on he's been out on the town, right?
Mm.
So he comes in famished from just a night of debauchery, right? So
Mm.
that's what's not said, right? The Bible saying the Torah uses a euphemism here. So that's why he's famished. He's had one of those nights.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is that the inference?
Well, why? Because first of all, they know Ace. There's something wrong with Esau. They know that we're going to establish. We haven't established it yet. It's about to be established that is he's having relations with Canaanite women, which his parents don't like. Now, we only know that he's marrying Canaanite women in the text, but that's enough. And the fact that he's doing that seems to be that's enough for the rabbis to then open it up for that.
He
This
couldn't
is
have come home. He couldn't have come from the fields working.
of course, that he's out hunting. I mean,
That's
the simple answer is he likes to hunt. We already know he's a skillful hunter. It says right there. It actually says he's an ish sadeh. It actually says he's a man of the outdoors. He's an outdoorsman. He's a hunter. Which, by the way, folks, remember, we're establishing not just two guys here. We're establishing Jew and Gentile. Esau becomes the antithesis of everything that's Jewish. That's what Esau is. If a Jew is supposed to be a student, is supposed to be a scholar, remember, a mild man who stayed in camp is not just he stays in camp, he's in the ohel, he's studying in the tents. The ohel is a euphemism for study, whereas the fields are euphemisms for out hunting. Well, that's the not really euphemism, that's probably the most basic understanding, but that it also could be he's out playing around. A man of the field would also again be
or earning a real living.
maybe, but he's not. Isaac likes whatever he's doing. Isaac likes it, and the assumption here is he's out hunting and Isaac likes it. But again, Jews don't hunt.
Jews go to brothels.
Jews aren't supposed to go to brothels.
I think it speaks
No,
more
no,
to
no,
what the
no, no, no.
rabbis were thinking.
Jews are not supposed to go to brothels. It's not that Jews didn't go to brothels, by the way, John. We're going to actually
I understand that.
we're going to read in about 9 chapters of a dude who's our ancestor, Judah, who doesn't go to a brothel, but he's going to a prostitute and he knows he's going to, well, he thinks he's going to a prostitute. So we know they do, but they're not supposed to. That's not where they're supposed to be. Esau being a guy who goes to a brothel isn't that he's behaving like a Canaanite. So again, it's not that Jews didn't, it's they were not supposed to, and it wasn't celebrated, right? So a guy who's out carousing in some cultures, he's just being a guy. He's like, going to a brothel is just part of growing up. That's not part of growing up for Jews. Part of growing up for Jews is going to yeshiva, going to the tent. So this, remember, becomes not just over the last 2,000 years, arguably the midrashim about Jacob and Esau, and actually I have a book called The Children of Rebekah, which basically outlines how the midrashim here set the tone for Jewish stereotypes and Gentile stereotypes more than any other part of the Bible. So more than any other text, this establishes what's Jewish behavior and what's Gentile behavior. And so all of it gets richly woven into the Midrash from an early time.
But so much of that, okay, if we look at this text, right in front of us, right? He came in from the field, he was a hunter, he was hungry. Okay? Maybe he trades his birthright, okay? But all the interpretation that we're talking about is from the rabbis, right? So those establishment of those stereotypes are by the Jews themselves.
Of course. And they're done by the period of the Roman period where Jews are like, that isn't what we do. Because the Edomites, Esau becomes actually the progenitor of the Romans, which is crazy because the Romans are not anywhere on the scene yet. There are no Romans yet. There isn't a Rome. There's barely a Greece yet. I want to tell you again, back to the Odyssey. There's barely a Greece. By the way, I finally saw it Sunday night. I liked it a lot, by the way. I happened to, I waited for all the BS to boil over, and then I wanted to see it at 70 millimeter IMAX. But anyways, uh, the myth the Jewish myth on Esau is so wonderful because he becomes the ancestor of the Romans, and then by extension he becomes the ancestor of Christians. So in the Middle Ages, when the Jews want to talk about Christians, they call them Esau, which is weird because he's the older brother. But in the Bible, the older brother is often the bully. In the Bible, the older brother is the one that you don't want to be, right? So the fact that Esau becomes Christians who are the newer religion, well, they're Roman. They're Roman. And so Esau becomes much worse than he really is. Okay. Esau, the Midrash has Esau. We're going to talk about some of them. Esau does not stop being the nemesis of the Jewish people. Like it never stops. It's today. For Jews today, Esau is still the the ancestor of all the people that want to hurt us because he's also the ancestor of Amalek. So he's he has all of our powers, but he uses them negatively. He uses them for bad. And he's the one we have to be most worried about because he should have known better and he could be better, but he's not. And he uses all of his power for bad. The weird thing for the Jews, by the way, I'm kind of skipping ahead on the Esau stuff, but the fact that Esau becomes the Romans means that the Jews and the Romans are flip sides of the same coin, which was like for Jews to say that 2,000 years ago was like the height of weird arrogance and like, self-aggrandizement because the Romans controlled a huge empire and the Jews were like a tiny part of that empire that most Romans didn't even think about. But the Jews saw themselves as the other side of that. And look, I mean, we're still here and the Romans aren't. The Roman Empire is got amazing ruins, but nobody, for the most part, is worshiping Jupiter anymore. But the fact that the Jews saw themselves as the flip side of the same coin was pretty wild. It's pretty there's a level of self-delusion there, which is that no, they're just like us, except the bad side of us. They're everything that we have, they have too, but they flipped it and are using it for bad. So that's what the I mean, that's we'll get to how we get to that, but that's how they saw it. So Esau, there's so much negativity surrounding him because and by the way, Esau, even because of that, and because of what was going on during that period, the Roman period, like there's like a couple lines about Esau in the Christian scriptures because the Christians, early Christians who were, kind of steeped in Midrash and knew that kind of stuff, they couldn't help themselves. They had to include it because it was so well known. So just keep that in mind. Esau is much bigger than just Jacob's brother. Uh yeah, it's gonna get interesting as we go through Esau's Esau's stuff. Gosh. I mean let's read a little bit more before we go down any more midrash any more midrash on Jacob and Esau. And quite frankly, we need to save some of it for next week when we read the real powerful blessing steal. But yeah, this is the birthright being stolen. That's the way this chapter ends. And again, at the very least, Esau, just on the surface of it, he doesn't, you know, Jacob outsmarts him, if you will, but Esau also just reckless. Um, you know, but I will say the rabbis didn't give Jacob a pass. Like they didn't say all of it's not there's not a unified understanding that Jacob did the right thing here, by the way. I just want to make it clear. They don't feel comfortable with what Jacob does here. Um yeah. Anybody else on this? Just the lesson here again. People bring this one and the blessing together, and it's two different stories. It's by the same author, by the way, but it's two different stories. And it actually, to some extent, I don't want to dwell on it. I'm not going to dwell on it, but because part of this chapter, the next chapter we're going to read, and this is what we're going to really read today, just chapter 26, because this chapter is kind of a mixture of the P&J authors, you kind of maybe lose, there's a little bit more distance between this chapter 25, and chapter 27, which is the blessing chapter. This one, like chapter 26, is like the chapter that everybody forgets because it's sandwiched between the two Jacob and Esau stories. But it's an interesting chapter for a lot of reasons, some of which will be immediately obvious to you. Some of them you'll be like, well, that just seems redundant, but let's take a look.
I think it's a little interesting that supposedly, I guess the Isaac and Jacob are still nomads at this point, but what he eats is bread and lentils, which is agricultural from fields.
Yeah, it's also vegetarian, by the way, which some people try to point out that rather it's not. I want to make this clear. It's a tough one. It's a tough one for the rabbis, right? It's a tough because they like Isaac. They don't want to harsh on Isaac too much, but I will. I'm laughing because there's a consequence to this midrash. Um, Basically, what's going on here is Jacob and his mother Rebecca are keeping kosher, whereas Isaac is eating whatever Esau hunts.
I see.
And let me just make that clear, because by virtue of it being hunted, it's not kosher. So anything that Isaac is eating from his son is not kosher. It's been hunted, not kosher. We
But
can't
we
eat
haven't
food.
gotten any of
We
the
haven't.
kashrut laws
You
yet.
okay, you say that, but remember, the
Just
rabbis do
one.
not like the fact that these people are not keeping kosher. They will not accept that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did not keep kosher. They will not accept that. Now, it doesn't say anywhere that they ate pork, but remember the story of Abraham serving the angels milk and meat together. They don't like that, and they have to interpret that, right? Here, they also have to interpret it in a very clear way that Esau is feeding his dad not kosher food, but that Rebecca and Jacob are not eating said unkosher food. They're sitting there eating, if they're eating meat, it's meat that they koshered. We're going to get to that in chapter 27, because remember, when Isaac is telling Esau to go out and hunt him and get him something, Rebecca and Jacob kill the animal and make it for their dad. I want to get, I'm only telling you that because this lentil stew is part of the story of, understanding what's going on in the family dynamic, especially in the Midrash, which has Jacob not eating not kosher food. Just telling you, it's the Midrash on that. It's based on this idea that Jacob would not have done that. I'm just telling you. Seems a little, I know it seems a little far-fetched, but he is eating lentils and it's not meat. So, doesn't mean, again, you're not going to get
Uh-uh.
Orthodox Jews. You're not going to get Orthodox Jews to tell you you're supposed to be vegetarian, but you know,
I'm sure there was a little beef thrown in there.
maybe,
Brent's beef and lentil stew.
maybe there could have been. John, it's
Uh, they
very
needed a little
possible.
protein.
Very possible that there was some protein in there. Could be.
The
Are they
lentils have
actually using the
plenty
word
of
lentil?
protein, John.
Wait, what?
Oh, are they actually using the word lentils? Do we
Yeah.
actually
I
know it
mean,
was a
it's
lentil soup?
yeah. The word they use is arashim.
Oh, I always wondered. Okay. So
So
that's red though. Adashim, is that no? What's that mean? Adashim with lentil?
adashim is the beans.
Okay. Okay.
So he gave him
Thank you.
bread too. There's bread here as well. He
Yeah,
just
I can hear that.
didn't
Read
give him
that.
soup, but he gave him lechem. But
Yeah.
but which again, like one of the arguments on why this is ridiculous for Esau to do this is that if he wasn't out, first of all, if he's out carousing, okay, so he's hungry, that's ridiculous. He could have had something to eat. He's just being stupid, and he's just stupid. He's a stupid guy. But if he was out hunting, he came back with no food. He came back with nothing. So he's supposed to be such a great hunter. He would have had food, so he could have eaten the food that he hunted. So he's just being greedy. He's just being reckless. He's just going around going, yeah, I can't be bothered to cook this yet. Just give me some of that. So that's also part of and it does make sense from the standpoint of if he's out hunting, then eat what you hunted. So there is that kind of
But
feeling
we
like,
all know that it takes a little while to
I
clean an
know, but I
animal and
know, but
pick
you
an
so you
animal.
throw
And if you're
okay,
hungry,
fine, but you throw you
I'm gonna be on
okay, but
Team Esau today.
you throw a little bird on a spit or whatever, your whatever the gazelle you just hunted, it's going to take cook it for an hour or so. The guy couldn't wait for an hour. It just doesn't make sense. Like there's a impulsiveness here, which okay, on one hand, he's really impulsive because he's just going out on the town, going nuts. But if he's hunting and he can't wait for his stuff to cook, he's eating his brother's food, then uh, you know, whatever. I mean, the text itself supports, first of all, it supports Jacob being um a little bit more supportive or kind than his brother even asks for it, because he just says, "Give me some of that red stuff." He doesn't even call it soup. He doesn't even call it stew. Just give me some of that red stuff. Like that's what he says. He doesn't call it what it is. And it says that his brother gave him bread and lentil stew. So his brother gave him above what he even asked for. But the way he asks for it, he says, "I want to gulp it down. I want to. I don't even want to eat it. I'm gonna destroy it." So there's a sense that he's a pig. I mean, that's the that's the takeaway from it, is he's just a reckless pig. And his brother tries to civilize him a little bit by saying, "Oh, he just wants to take it out of the bowl. Just give me a ladle. I want some of this." And his brother, like, takes it out, puts it on a plate, serves it to him with some bread, gives him some drink, tries to treat him like, tries to make him a human being. Okay. There's some stuff in the text to support that. It's not just a midrash. There is something in the text to support that. Now, chapter 26 diverges. And again, you would say, based on the authorship, this is the same author as the previous verse. It's not like there's a new author. But what is going on here?
Rabbi, before we go on,
Yes, yes.
is a birthright something you inherit when the parents die, or is a birthright something that you control from the time that someone announces it? There could be another interpretation that this huge gift of a birthright, um, when Jacob says, "Give me your birthright." Is it possible Esau doesn't take that seriously? First of all, because it's not Jacob's uh, position to ask, and it's not Esau's to give away, since he doesn't really have it yet.
That's a good point. Well, yeah, I mean, I would tell you this, along the lines that it doesn't mean anything yet. The text and the midrash that continues this is based on, I'm about to die. which of course, according according to most interpretations, is him being impulsive and stupid. But he says, if I'm going to die, what use is the birthright to me? It does. There's no value to it now for me to have this now. So there is that. No matter what, there is that understanding that like it doesn't mean anything to me now, and you know, like if I'm not around to use it, what difference does it make? Look, I think that there's clearly, as we're about to see, at least established a little bit more in the Joseph stories. I think there is this understanding that the chosen one, if you will, the one who's going to be the birthright inheritor, the prime child, there is a level of importance given to that child before death, before the actual transfer of the estate. So I think there does seem to be something in the Bible, in the biblical period, that is at least giving us this understanding that it's more than just I inherit this stuff. It's the recognition that like this is the child that we're cultivating to lead the tribe after we're gone. Look, everybody goes, well, he gets twice as much as his brother, but there were huge responsibilities that come with that too. So the Bible doesn't get into that. The Midrash does get into it, which is, the person should deserve to have that responsibility, which is why the Bible always upends the birth order. Why the Bible's always playing with birth order and basically saying, yeah, we know about the birth order thing, but we're not playing by that rule. So the Bible always upends it. But there's also this, I mean, it already did with Isaac. It's going to with Jacob. It's going to with Joseph. It's always upended. It was really with Cain and Abel. But there were other responsibilities. I mean, if you got that money, you had to take care of your mother. Uh, if you are the inheritor, the prime inheritor, when your dad dies, you have to maintain your mother's tent as well. So it's not just you get free spending money. You have to kind of lead the tribe afterwards, and you have to sustain. It's not just your money. It's money that you're going to use for other people. You get to control it, but you have responsibilities with it. So I think I think there is a sense that you have to deserve it. You have to be the person that people would go, yeah, that person's going to make good decisions. Whereas Esau is already proving, and if he has more money, it just means he's going to go out and get more women. So there, that is 100% in the background here. There is a real question of who do we trust, and you're gonna see that play out a few times with like, is Isaac really dying? Is Esau really dying? Is like people say they're dying, they're not dying, and it's it plays out in some weird ways. But yeah, the family dysfunction here is definitely playing out at a major level because we're still dealing with the ramifications from this little incident thousands of years later. And again, make the argument that it completely establishes Jewish archetypes.
And one of the themes that we've established is that there's a contemporaneous feel to this Torah, that things that happened thousands of years ago are happening today. And I keep thinking about the Kennedy family and the Joseph Kennedy and leaving his elder son the birthright, as it were, only to have him killed in war. And then there's John Kennedy who takes on this mantle, even though he didn't live his life, at least the beginning of it, thinking that he was going to end up the the birthright holder from his father, and it's just a fascinating retelling of the story in a sort of contemporaneous way. Not that John Kennedy is Esau, but there is that sense of passing on the mantle of leadership and being unworthy to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it happens across, when the parents also try to manipulate it, then, the irony of watching that play out, not the way the parents intended, is also, it's also part of the tragedy of this. I will say, I shouldn't have to say it, and I'd rather not say it, but as the archetypes go, uh, the rabbis have no issue establishing that Jacob is in the tent studying, etc. But it doesn't go without notice, especially amongst the people who eventually will become the major readers of the Bible, which are not Jews. Uh, Jacob, who's their ancestor too, because he's the ancestor of Judah and he's the ancestor then of Jesus and everybody else. But he's definitely the ancestor of the Jews. And this predatory type of behavior is what Jews would be like, oh, they learned that from their ancestor Jacob. They learned that kind of behavior to be predatory in business from their ancestor. It's not the way we tell the story, but it's the way some people tell the story. So I would rather not have had to say that, but it's a big part of anti-Semitism that's ironically rooted in the Bible that we shared with the world. And again, partly it's because we'll talk about it, and we'll definitely talk about it by the time we get to Genesis a bunch of times. There is not one of our biblical ancestors who gets out unscathed. There's not one of them. They all get it. Everybody's dark side is there. And as my teacher, Richard Friedman, essentially wrote, there's a reason for that. God does not work through perfect people. God works through imperfect vessels who do the same things that all of us do. But Jacob's behavior a few times in the stories that we're going to read, he doesn't seem like a guy that you want to turn your back on. He's not a guy that you want to take lightly, and he's not a guy that you shouldn't think is trying to figure out some way to get the best of you.
If she shakes hands with you, you want to count your fingers.
Yeah. So let's read a little bit. Now, we don't have much about Isaac. This story is pretty much it. We read that he almost gets killed by his dad. It's going back. That's chapter 22. Chapter 24 at the end, he meets his wife. Chapter 25, he talks to God because he wants her to have a baby. That's it. And we know that he likes his sons hunt, but that's pretty much it. This is about the only story where we see Isaac, the only chapter where we see really Isaac do anything other than very beginning of chapter 27. And we really have like 3 chapters about Isaac, and not full chapters, like 3 chapters. And this one being the only one that I could say is like from start to finish Isaac. So let's look at this little chapter about Isaac.
There was a famine in the land, aside from the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. God had appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land that I point out to you. Reside in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all these lands to you and to your heirs, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your heirs as numerous as the stars of heaven, and assign to your heirs all these lands, so that all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your heirs. Inasmuch as Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my laws and my teachings.
Yeah. Uh those first few verses. Um um I don't think we need to, yeah. We'll get to the next part of this in a sec, but these few verses here, obviously they sound a lot like what God said to Abraham, right? Except for this. Don't
Yep.
go down to Egypt. Don't go to Egypt. So Isaac gets clear instruction, don't go to Egypt. So it's almost as if God learned, I got to give these people really clear instructions. I got to tell them, not only is this land theirs, don't go to another land. So that's that's a little different. Of course, there's the establishment that this is Abraham. I talked to your father about this, right? And that's part of it. Now, it's not just a covenant I made with you, I made it with your father. It's intergenerational. There's now some time here. There's relationship built over generations. This part is numerous as stars of the heavens. The nations will bless themselves through you. Very similar. This is different. God's assessment of Abraham is he obeyed me. Now, Rosemary, I will say this. The reason why the rabbis will say these people kept the Torah is because it says he
Mhm.
kept my
Mitzvot.
mishmar, he kept my mitzvot, he kept my laws, he kept my Torah.
Mhm.
Now, again, we'll translate it as teachings because that's probably what they meant. But the rabbis read it literally. Abraham was keeping the Torah. What was that Torah like? They would say it's like the Torah. It's the Torah. It's the same laws, the kashrut, everything else. So Abraham had some kind of law more than what we heard so far, because whatever law he had right now, it's circumcise your kids in 8 days. That's it. That's the only mitzvah we have. Honestly, that's the only mitzvah we have. That's the only mitzvah we have in the whole book of Genesis. So there seems to be like a plural. So there seems to be other laws. And again, it could be, you know, do what I tell you to do. And now he's added another one, which is don't leave, don't go to Egypt. But as I mentioned before, Isaac is the only one of our ancestors that doesn't go. He doesn't leave. Abraham goes to Abraham started off not even in the land. He starts in Aram, goes to Egypt. Jacob goes to Aram and then dies and goes to Egypt and dies there. So our ancestors, except for Isaac, they go north and south. He doesn't. He doesn't leave. He doesn't even go up to Aram to get his wife, right? So um yeah, I mean look at this. This is Abraham's blessing and then some. And then some. Any comment? And but by the way, like there's a famine, right? There's a famine. So we know that there's a famine, and there's this Avimelech, which again, it says he's the king of the Philistines and lives in Gerar. He's a Philistine king, which they seem to use almost interchangeably for the Canaanites, but he's not an Israelite king. He's not a Abrahamic king. He's not related to us. And the name Avimelech means my father the king, which is as much a title as it is a name. Avimelech is like Pharaoh, my father the king, in Canaanite slash Hebrew. So it seems to be, oh, we know this. We know this tale. We know this tale. And we know where this tale is going to lead to. Shenanigans. Shenanigans. Uh, any questions? All right. Let's take a look at what happens now.
So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the locals asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister," for he was afraid to say, "my wife," thinking, "the locals might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful." When some time had passed, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looking out of the window, saw Isaac fondling his wife Rebekah. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say she is my sister?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Abimelech said, "What have you done to us? One of the men might have lain with your wife and you would have brought guilt upon us."
Okay. Yeah, let's finish the story, then we'll go back.
Abimelech then charged all the people, saying, "Anyone who molests this man or his wife shall be put to death."
Yeah. So before we move on any further, let's discuss this. Where to even begin? Well, obviously, it's very similar to what happened with Abraham twice. So you wonder, like, didn't anybody learn? Uh,
No, would Isaac even have known about that story?
well, it
That's
happened
the kind of
twice.
thing you discuss with your kids.
It happened twice. Now, arguably, the one in chapter 20 happens after he's born. We don't know how old he was when it happened. I am not, I don't do this a lot, and I'm going to do it now because it needs to be done. I'm going to go back to the authors on this, the authorship issue, because this is clearly a J story. Why do we know it's a J story? Well, we know it's a J story because um uh well, first of all, this is all, well, uh assuming that all of this was from the same author. They translate it as God, but it's you see the Yud Hey Vav Hey name, so we know it's a J story because it's got God's name written out. But here's the weird thing. First of all, this story, very much like the previous two stories, which were written by different authors. The one in Egypt is written by the J author. The one in Gerar with Avimelech was written by the E author, the other northern author who is early, like from J, a contemporary maybe of the J author. Now let me explain why this is important. There are two J stories of Abraham and Isaac doing the same thing, and they're very similar because it's the I'm going to be killed on her account and that she's beautiful. Um, um, the the E author, I you know what? I'll just show you real quick. I'll just show you real quick in this other in this. This is a website which has the different authors in. I think I've shown it before in different colors. The J author is in blue and the E author is in green. So this story is different because for a few reasons, not least of which is he doesn't say his wife's beautiful, but he also um he it also doesn't give the motivation, which is you're going to kill me until uh um 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 he tells her in the E story that she is my half sister. Look, there's not going to be any, you can see the difference in the story. There's no, there's no, she's my sister business here. She's not. She's his cousin once removed. So there, he's lying. I mean, he's lying and he says why he's lying. And so it goes back to the J author version that's similar to the Egypt story. What's interesting about the way, I want to make this real clear. I hope I make it clear. What's interesting about this story now in chapter 26 is it actually is a link that helps you understand the authorship from this reason. The chapter 20 is the E author telling a story about a wife of one of the patriarchs being taken by the local Philistine king. And his name is Avimelech, and he's from Gerar. The J author has two stories, one with Abraham having his wife, Sarah, being taken by the Egyptian Pharaoh, and then a story of Rebecca being taken by the Avimelech king from Gerar. The E author has a story of Abraham's wife being taken by Avimelech of Gerar. The E story actually, well, all the stories preserve the same kind of narrative, but the E story actually is the story where you can almost say, well, everyone knew there was a story like that. In my version, it was Abraham, and it's during that time. Because otherwise, it's just such a weird thing that the same guy, Avimelech, or maybe it's not, maybe it's a title, but the same thing that goes on with Abraham then goes on with Isaac with the same kind of setup. And so when you realize that the J stories are the Egyptian one and this one, and the piece and the E story is the story of from chapter 20, it makes a lot more sense. It sits a lot better with me from the standpoint that there's two versions of the story being played out with two different generations, which is weird and it's sad, but one happened in Egypt. And it's almost as if the J author is saying, like, this stuff is inescapable. Abraham did it when he went to Egypt, but look, we have to do it even in our own country. Now, this story is less dangerous in the sense that you can almost make the argument that Isaac just is panicking for no reason, right? And nobody seems to have, Avimelech doesn't even take Rebecca into his palace. He says somebody could have. In the J story with Egypt before, Pharaoh is like there with her in the same room, like in the palace. That's not what's happening here. What's weird about this version of the story is that Avimelech sees the two of them. This translation is a lot more descriptive than the King James translation because, Mary, what does it say in the King James translation for Rebecca? Avimelech sees the window in verse 8, he says, sometime past Avimelech. What does the King James say? Oh, I don't know if Mary's there. Nope, they're not there. Sorry. Anybody have a King James? Glory, what does your Bible say? Or verse 8?
Hold on a second. I got to get my Bible. I'm just following along online.
Okay.
One
That's all
second.
right. I'm curious because I guarantee it's not fondling. I'm not going to guarantee, but I'm pretty sure it's not going.
The Hebrew is mitzachek, yeah?
I know. Don't you're jumping ahead, Judith. Let her read her translation
Okay,
first.
chapter.
26 verse 8.
No. When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife, Rebekah.
Oh, caressing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the King James is sporting with his wife, or with Rebecca, his wife.
Hmm.
That's the King James, sporting. As Judith just said, what is it? What's the Hebrew?
Mitzachek.
So read the word before.
Sorry, Yitzchak, mitzachek at Rivka. So Yitzchak mitzachekt his wife.
Yeah. It's much better in the Hebrew. I don't care how you translate it in the Hebrew. Yitzhak Mitzachek. I mean, this name means laughter and playing around and sporting and gaming and whatever. Playing. Yitzhak is playing around with his wife, but the player is playing with his wife. Now, again, that's not what the word Yitzhak means. It means laughter, but he's having fun with her. It's much better in Hebrew. The hine yitzachek mitzachek. And the setup for it's even better because he's looking out of his window. He's looking out his window. The king is out there in his palace, looking out his window and sees this guy playing around with his wife. And he doesn't know that it's his wife. He thinks it's his sister. He's like, what kind of pervert is out there? I know that guy, Isaac. I let him stay here. And he's out there playing with his sister. That's creepy. Yeah. So Hebrew's much better. However you're gonna translate. Um, but of course, Isaac says, I was worried for my life. I didn't know what to do. Um, by the way, yeah, the crumb picture on this pretty explicit. Well, it's not explicit, but
Probably
it's
don't put it
okay.
up.
It's a crumb picture. Anyways,
I can imagine.
so he yeah, I mean, think about it. This guy is just, he's living his life trying to, not get killed. Um, it's you know, it's a it's a great scene, right? So, when you think of our patriarchs, this scene is almost always forgotten because again, it's sandwiched between the great Jacob stories. But this scene of Isaac being caught in the act, I mean, it's a whole nother layer. Yeah, there you go.
What it all boils down to, though, is for thousands, for millennia, women have been, we've been allowing men to accost women unchecked and making excuses for them and hiding it. And it really isn't on the women, it is on the men.
Yeah, but is he accosting? Is Isaac accosting
No,
his
no,
wife?
Isaac is not accosting his wife,
Oh,
but the whole thing about no, he's with his wife. That's, he's mitzvaheking, as it
yeah.
were. But all these Avi Melechs and all these, people going, you could take my wife, so I'm going to say she's my sister. You could kill me because of a woman. It's all, it's been unchecked for millennia, and we need to check it.
Well, interestingly, uh, we didn't read that verse yet. We read to 11. Um, the Gentile king is the hero in this story. He's worried. He's acting more ethically than Isaac, right? He's the one who says, "Wait, well, wait. One of us could have done something horrible here, right?" And he steps up and says, "Yeah, we nobody better touch nobody better touch this man or his wife." Now, again, you know, man or his wife. I mean, I guess it still puts her in a subservient position, but ish hazeh uva ishto. But look, he says anyone who touches them, I'm going to kill them. So he protects them. He also says to Isaac, "Why'd you do that?" Right?
But he's looking out his window, and Isaac felt like he had to lie to bring his wife into this other place. I understand that it's millennia ago and that we do that, that it was, taking other people's women and impregnating them was a way to take over a country. But it kind of still goes on today to a slightly different level, obviously, of purpose, but it's still not checked. And it's been since millennia. And
Well, remember, Isaac is a different people, right? Isaac is an outsider. I mean, again, the guy behaves completely ethically and morally upright and is does the right thing and etc. But he doesn't know that. Isaac doesn't know that. What's also interesting is he has the same fears that his father has, which is that we're very we live a very precarious situation here, surrounded by all these people. Even though God's promised them success, they don't stop being afraid. Which is a really interesting lesson too, which is that faith doesn't do away with fear, at least not with these guys. They're still afraid.
protecting themselves at the cost of their wives.
Look, I'm not gonna argue the feminine. There's not a feminist feeling in this. There's no question, but I mean, his argument was they're going to kill me and take her anyways. I mean, that's his argument. That's what he's fearing. That's what he thinks is going to happen. He says I was going to lose my. It wasn't just they're going to take my wife. They're going to kill me and take my wife. So look, the motivation's given here, and it's consistent in the J stories. Whatever you want to say about the J author, he does not leave out those details. It says the locals might kill me on account of my wife Rebecca, for she is beautiful, which is the same thing it says about Sarah. So there seems to be this other understanding that she's so hot that everyone's going to want to kill me and take her, right? So there does seem to be this other level of maybe because she's so attractive, she's gonna. I mean, look, I'm just saying it is there. It is there. But whatever it is, he's definitely afraid. Definitely afraid. But what we get is a flip, which is the guy does the right thing and actually says, "Do not touch this guy." So if we want to account anything against Isaac in this story, obviously you could say he shows a lack of faith. He's lying. He's pulling the same kinds of shenanigans that his father did. Though his father, we just heard from God, was good. Abraham's all good with me. Whatever he did wrong, I think he was okay. God just told him that. So maybe he knew his father pulled those shenanigans with the Egyptians, or in that. I
Or
mean,
God
how
just told him it was okay, so he thought he could do it too.
you can make that argument. His father just got a clean bill of health from God, and why not? I mean, he just literally told him that this chapter. So maybe he thought I can do what my dad did, and that is part of the story, right? Part of the story is history repeating itself, children inheriting behaviors from the people that came before them, even if they didn't want to imitate them, they do anyways, right? And so, families have these cycles that, they say they're going to break and they may want to break, but they don't break. But again, let's look at it in the face of it, which is they're fearful because they're the minority in the country and they don't know what's going to happen. They know Sodom and Gomorrah. They know what people are capable of. And so you can understand it. I mean, like, I get it. I mean, I understand it. I understand why they'd be fearful. They have no protection. So, yeah, it's a weird scene. It's maybe less weird if you think about the fact that it really doesn't happen three times. It happens twice to two different generations. It doesn't happen necessarily with the same people in the same author. So, like I said, I don't like to dwell on the authorship, but in this case, it helps me. It helps me go, calm it down. This isn't happening all the time. It happened in two generations. It's repetitive. It's a repetitive behavior, but it's not the same thing happening it's not Abraham. And all I'm saying is, like, this story confirms to me the authorship issue, and it resolves it because let that previous story be the author, and then this happens to Isaac as it happened to Abraham in two different places, and that story is kind of like the proof that that's there was a tradition that had happened in Gerar. Okay. So we're going to finish up with the wells, which is kind of an interesting story in itself. It's definitely a different story. It's not, it's not, I mean, we'd also say that this was a different author. This is actually the P author, but I'm only saying that because, like, all of a sudden it just changes gears. So, though, um, this last verse would have gone with the previous one because it's also a Yud Hey Vav Hey one. It's part of the J. But anyways, so he says, "Don't let anyone molest this man or his wife. They're going to die if they do it." And here's what it says.
Isaac sowed in that land and reaped 100-fold the same year. God blessed him, and the man grew richer.
And by the way, that would have ended the P story. The J story. The P author begins here, which is like a repetition of this previous verse. But here, all they did was put a comma, or they didn't really put a comma. They couldn't because it's two different verses. But in the English translation, they did because it could have started here.
And the man grew richer and richer until he was very wealthy. He acquired flocks and herds and a large household, so that the Philistines envied him. And the Philistines stopped up all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham, filling them with earth.
Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is it seems to be two different stories that kind of got merged together, because there's definitely something going on here with Isaac increasing and then getting having problems with his neighbors. So the interesting thing is that this was kind of set in motion by the fact that Isaac is told, we're protecting you. Don't worry about anything that happens here. But look what happens. They start to not like the fact he's doing so well.
And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you have become far too big for us." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the Wadi of Gerar, where he settled. Isaac dug anew the wells that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and that the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham's death, and he gave them the same names that his father had given them.
So that's it's an interesting little line of Torah.
Yeah,
Why?
sounds like there's two traditions, one that Abraham dug the wells and one that Isaac did.
Yeah, but there definitely is there is a recognition that something happened after Abraham died, that the Philistines or the Canaanites or the people that live in that land kind of reclaimed stuff that Abraham had done. Once Abraham wasn't there to maintain it,
Mhm.
that they were kind of reclaimed it. So Isaac's job here is to some extent to reclaim his father's wells. And that's why, the understanding is that this is not just wells. This represents Abraham, kind of the legacy of Abraham now being lived by Isaac. Isaac is finally kind of stepping up into his own. Now, what's interesting here is that as he's doing this, it doesn't, well, let's read it, but it doesn't make things easier.
But when Isaac's servants, digging in the wadi, found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." He named that well Esek because they contended with him.
So that's the word esek, right? Which means contention. It says the next time.
And when they dug another well, they disputed over that one also. So he named it Sitnah, harassment. He moved from there and dug yet another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now at last God has granted us ample space to increase in the land."
Yeah. So Rehov means space, room, open country. Let's see what it says here. Let's say ample space. So we know Rehoboth. We have places in America named after Rehoboth, right? This country was, for many people who settled here, considered open space. Of course, there were already people in some of those open spaces, but you could understand why when people from Europe came here to the New World and saw these open places that went on for miles and miles, that they thought they were in a biblical promised land. But what happens here with Isaac is that he digs these wells, and again, it's not clear whether they're his father's wells or their new wells, but because it said originally that he named them after what his father named them, but here he's naming them because of what's happening there, which is problems. The first two ones are problems, and you notice that Isaac doesn't stay there. Isaac goes away from those, and he finally, the third time, and it's one of those, the rule of three, the third time's the charm, right? Third time's the charm, and he gets his space. He gets a place where he can water his flocks. So he lets go, and he doesn't fight. He doesn't argue. He leaves. They do it again. And at a certain point, you're like, just stand and fight, right? But he doesn't. And because he doesn't, he eventually finds his place, which is that he doesn't escalate. He doesn't. I mean, I don't know if he would have eventually been pushed to the brink, but he doesn't. He he needs a place to breathe. He needs the open space where he's not going to find somebody on the other side of the well arguing with him. And that's kind of what we need in today's world. We just need to find a place where we just don't have to argue all the time. It's hard because wherever we go, we seem to come to a place that like we're like, wait, we're gonna have to fight there too, and um, there's only so much you can do to keep going and hoping that people will just leave you alone. But we try. I mean, like, try a couple times. You don't have to escalate every time someone gets in your face, but at a certain point, like enough is enough. But he tries, a couple times. Um, and I think this story tells us to some extent that it's okay to walk away, once or twice and not make that where we have to, there might be other wells out there, right? And again, you don't have to do it all the time, but there definitely are times and places where you don't have to fight. You can walk away. So there's definitely a sense here that the water is something much more than the wells are not just water for flocks, they're waters for life. That they're something bigger. There's more at stake here than just water. So let's finish this up. Let's finish this last part of this story.
From there, he went up to Beersheba. That night, God appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and increase your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham. So he built an altar there and invoked God by name. Isaac pitched his tent there, and his servants started digging a well. And Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzat, his counselor, and Phicol, chief of his troops. Isaac said to them, Why have you come to me, seeing that you have been hostile to me and have driven me away from you? And they said, We now see plainly that God has been with you. And we thought, let there be a sworn treaty between our two parties, between you and us. Let us make a pact with you that you will not do us harm, just as we have not molested you, but have always dealt kindly with you and sent you away in peace. From now on, be you blessed of God. Then he made for them a feast, and they ate and drank. Early in the morning, they exchanged oaths. Isaac then bade them farewell, and they departed from him in peace. That same day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug, and said to him, We have found water. He named it Shiva. Therefore, the name of that city is Beersheba to this day.
Yeah, well, we already read about Sheva being named in that day, that this was going back to Abraham and the wells that he dug, which were again also a symbol of, hey, this is my space. And that's how it got called Beersheba before. So here's another Beersheba story. This is another time where Beersheba gets its name not from seven sheep, which is another version of it, but uh, but again, this is back to the version of the story that we have, where the well of Beersheba becomes a well of oath of promise that there's not going to be fighting anymore. Okay, so it's kind of a nice uh it's a nice version of that story. Again, it goes back to chapters 20 and 21, the stories of again, same people are mentioned, Avimelech and Phicol. Um, so there seems to be a repetition of this scene too, which is we're not going to fight anymore. Um, it's a well of oaths. Again, previously there's at least one version of the story that it's because of the 7 lambs that they slaughtered there as a symbol of peace. Okay. Different traditions of these wells. Um, let's just read the last few verses. Uh, well, the no, let's not, because these last verses, these last verses really go with the next story, and they really don't go with the story, but they go with what happens at the end of the story.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, let's read about that. But the woman's name is Judith. Judith is
I told you
here.
I'm team Esau this year. This read I'm going to be team Esau.
But just remember, this is a Judith who isn't Jewish. She's a Canaanite. She's a Hittite. She's a. But anyways, we're going to read about the marriage of Esau and then the setup for the marriage of Jacob, which is interesting because, gosh, I don't like to dwell on it, but that definitely seems to be the priestly author's big issue, which is don't marry Canaanites. And as a priestly author, you can understand why he's don't marry Canaanites because the priests were really obsessed with genetic purity and who's begetting who. They don't want Canaanites in the begetting in any of the begetting. Uh, which, by the way, this is Rick Lupert's one of his poetry books on Breshit called "Begin the Beget," which is kind of a clever name for a book of uh, the poetry that he wrote, commentary. But again, I definitely recommend this for people who are interested in how would people depict some of this stuff because nobody does. I mean, there's never been a movie that depicts Genesis the way it's actually there on the text. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, can you imagine a version of Genesis that shows Isaac caressing, fondling his wife while a guy's looking out from above, clearly seeing what's going on, knowing that they're not brother and sister. So whatever kind of caressing is going on, it's not it's not the caressing, that anyways. Everybody knows who Crumb is, by the way. For those who don't think you know Crumb, that's Crumb. Keep on Truckin' was his probably his most famous cartoon. But yeah, it's an interesting in between story that we just read, which is again really the only things we know about Isaac is this chapter. And look, I mean, he doesn't look bad. If he looks bad, he doesn't look any worse than Abraham. Definitely don't think he looks as bad as his son Jacob's gonna look soon. Um,
For literary interest, right? Isaac, let's go with the fact that this is these guys existed, right? And their stories were handed down, and they realized that the stories about Isaac is he was fine, he was a good guy, he married this woman, but he is, like I said, not
yes,
as
say it.
important a character. So they said
So
we got
say
to
what
give him some
say what
stories.
he is, Judith.
He's a middle child. You have to you have to give him some stories. So they took a couple and kind of changed him a little bit because maybe he was just, the good, calm, rational, relaxed leader doesn't make the news, doesn't make the novel, right? So
Oh no, he doesn't.
he
He
doesn't. So
literally,
they
this
have
is
to
it.
add a little bit to his story to make him and they just picked a couple stories and, you know,
Chapter 26 is the only chapter where
yeah.
Isaac talks and uh
And he says and does stuff that his father did. It's not his own stuff.
yeah,
So, I mean, they're
it,
variations, but it's
but chapter 25 already had Jacob and Esau interacting, right? We've read it. It ends with that. Chapter 27, Rebecca, Esau, and Jacob are all doing stuff. Chapter 26 is the only chapter in Genesis. It's the only chapter of the Bible where Isaac does everything from start to finish. And it's one chapter, it's 30 something verses, 36 verses, 35 verses. And I don't want to say it's boring, but it didn't give us a whole lot that we haven't read before. There's wells, there's a sexual replacement wife for sister thing, and the wells, and that's it. And as Judith said, it seems to be like, let's just repeat a couple stories, and they're Isaac, not Abraham.
beef up his PR, beef up his image a little
But
bit.
he
Make him
doesn't, but he has nothing. And this is it.
nothing
This is the
except
only
this.
chapter. So there's really only a couple chapters that he's mentioned at all. As I said, chapter 22, he's in the background in chapter 24 with the getting the wife. He's in chapter 25 for a minute. But if it wasn't for this chapter, there'd be nothing about him. He has ownership of nothing. There's nothing that he does other than and what we know about him is that, he gets tricked, he gets played. And yeah, it's a weird thing. Again, your point that he's the middle child has been noted by people, studying this for a while. And um arguably one of the most forgotten chapters in all of the book of Genesis, because everybody knows the birthright and then the blessing story. They don't even remember this chapter. I'm telling you, when they read Parshat Toldot, like people just, I think there were some wells mentioned, and that's it. Like sometimes people remember the Isaac Rebecca wife sister story, and some people are like, wait, that's the same story we read with Abraham. So like they
And
don't know
with
this chapter.
the triennial divisions now, you miss a year because you have the flu and it's all over.
You don't know anything about him. And again, I would argue you really don't know anything about him anyways, other than he repeats some of the same behavior as his father, same actions, the same kinds of stuff. But yeah, not a lot. We don't have a lot. I mean, I don't want to beat it to death, but this is it. You read it, and we're gonna read one more chapter with him in it, and then he ain't there anymore. So you blink and you miss Isaac completely. So yeah, next week we're gonna read the very famous story of the blessing being stolen, which arguably to me is one of the most powerful stories in Genesis, and maybe one of the most powerful stories in the Torah, because of its everything, because of its emotion. It's such a well written story. It has so many levels to it of of like when you look at it and you realize what's going on there. It's so tight. It's such a tight story, and it's one of those stories you have to read. You do. I mean, I don't know how many times I've read it, 100 times, whatever. You have to read it 100 times because there's always something new you see in it, and it's just completely, constantly unpacks, with another level. So yeah,
Before
it's
you go,
yes.
today would have been my father's 99th birthday.
Oh,
August
beautiful.
11th would have been his 99th birthday, and I want to publicly acknowledge how much I value the gift he gave me of study, and how much he loved attending this Torah study class when it started and we used to be in person and he was in town. He never
Yeah.
did master the iPad, but he
You always
loved
can.
to come. He always came on Tuesday mornings with me. Uh,
Yeah, he had
and
a brilliant mind, a
very
brilliant
bright,
mind.
very well read.
And we were really lucky that he not only would come and want to come, but that he yeah, he created an amazing family. And again, he had a mind that he used for work, but he also, you know, his example of taking a, a Ivy League trained mind and using it also for Torah is inspiring because, you know, he didn't just use it for making money and doing business.
And he believed in justice and kindness. Um, and I understood him a lot better after he passed, which is probably pretty common. Isaac probably understood his father a lot better after Abraham, after he buried him. I think probably you get some understanding um,
Yeah,
after the fact.
absolutely. Well, just think about this. It's Margot's 99th birthday 2 weeks from now.
Oh,
And I was just with her on Sunday. Yeah, 2 days ago. And I don't understand how some people just continue to knock stuff out, man. She's still talking about writing and rewriting one of her books and editing. It's like, when you have your mind, and your dad had his mind pretty much throughout his life, it's a pretty cool thing too.
Joy Schulman will be 97 in September.
Yep.
Yeah, September. It's crazy. But 99, you think 99 is like, anyways. All right. We all should be 99. We're all supposed to be 120. And
120 is our brain.
Isaac lived to be 180. So there you go. He should be live till Isaac didn't have a very good life though. So we don't always say may you have a long life like Isaac. Say you live 120 like Moses did. May have a stream. Because he died with full vitality. It seems like Isaac doesn't have full vitality, at least for a good chunk of his life. Not joking. I mean, it's like, he's blind. In the next scene we're gonna see. It says right here, the next verse, or not the next verse, the beginning of the next chapter. So we're gonna get there. We're gonna finish with we're gonna start with chapters the very end, 34 and 35. Judith, there you go. Source of bitterness. You were a source of bitterness to your ancestor, your original Canaanite ancestor. Um, but of course, you're a heroine in the story of Judith and Holofernes. So, all right, everybody, have a good rest of the week.
thank you,
And
Rabbi.
Thank
we'll
you.
see.
Hold on. We got
Oh,
tomorrow.
eat for TBA on Thursday, by the way, too. At Islands.
No, it's Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday.
This week.
Sorry. Yeah, it's Wednesday. Eat for TBA is the 12th. It's tomorrow. And we have class at 7. So you can go to Islands and then join us for Wednesday night for Jews and TV and film. Part 1.
Then there could be 10 parts.
Could be. Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.